Thank you for tuning in to the hottest podcast on these internet streets, giving you nothing but the facts about STEM education, inspiration, and motivation for our future leaders of tomorrow. We believe in creating future scientists one test tube at a time. The More Than Just Science show is going in a different direction this quarter, as we will be encouraging you weekly on the ideas you can use at your home if you are a parent, at school if you are a student, and in the classroom if you are an educator. Students, come get this knowledge. Teachers, come take some notes. Parents, come educate your kids. And listeners, stay tuned because we're bringing you facts from yours truly, the two-time award-winning Professor Tabby, aka TK the Chemist Ship. Your favorite professor of chemistry of the More Than Just Science show. Welcome to our show on this beautiful day. You could be anywhere else, but you chose to join us. And for that, I want to say thank you. This is the More Than Just Science show, and I'm your host, Professor TK the Chemist. If you want to get in touch with me about anything you've heard today or on my past shows, please reach out to me on Instagram at TK the Chemist, Twitter at TK the Chemist01, my website, www.mygemsforkids.com, Facebook, My Gems Science Center. You can also email me at tkthechemist@gmail.com. We also have an online store where we sell science treats and shirts for kids of all ages. If you don't see it, we can create it. So let's go ahead and get straight into this content. What's the word in STEM this week?
Must learn.
On July 25th, scientists and many others all around the world celebrated the birth of 40-year-old Louise, who was the first baby born as a result of in vitro fertilization, or IVF. It's basically a procedure that unites sperm and egg outside of the body. Her birth was heralded around the world with headlines declaring that the first test tube baby had been born. The announcement was met with excitement from some, fear and hostility from others. But one thing was certain, this was truly the beginning of a new era in how babies are created. Scientists soon began to work on other animals before turning eventually to humans. Now, check this out. We talk about in vitro fertilization because that seems to be something that a lot of women, I should say families, because it takes a man to help create a child as well. But a lot of the families are actually going through this process, and it seems like in vitro fertilization has intensified over the past several decades. And while we celebrate 40 years of the first baby being born through in vitro fertilization, we have to remember that there have been other procedures and experiments involving the insemination of the eggs with sperm. Now, there was a doctor, he was a research scientist named Dr. Robert Edwards, who received a Nobel Prize for his work because he basically carried eggs between labs in Oldham and Cambridge in a container strapped to his body. Some of his early experiments involved inseminating the eggs with his own sperm. And there was a steep learning curve that, of course, led to failures, because anytime you're in science doing things, a lot of times your experiments don't always come out right. That's why we always say do 3 trial runs and then you get the average of those 3. More than 300 women had oocytes or egg cells removed without success before Louise was conceived. So as you can see, there was a lot of efforts put into this. But if I think about how this expensive technology helps parents create babies, there's also controversy because of the unprecedented amount of control over the reproductive process. Like, some people actually fear what could happen if they do this. Will their babies be born with 2 arms, 2 legs, 5 fingers, 6 fingers, 10 toes? Like, what could possibly happen? this whole facet of creating life in a test tube or a petri dish isn't anything new. As a matter of fact, these scientists are helping to assist parents to either delete, modify, or add genes in developing embryos so that their cells of the resulting person will produce proteins that make them taller and more muscular or smarter, along with other quote-unquote perfect genetics. I read an article that indicated that as early as 1993, a March of Dimes poll found that 43% of Americans would engage in genetic engineering to quote-unquote simply to enhance their children's looks or intelligence. Now, we know that this whole designer gene babies thing is very controversial because it allows parents to pick out the traits they desire while getting rid of children they don't want if there are any underlying medical issues. And although there are pros and cons surrounding this controversial scientific technique, to me, it is more controversial when you discuss how quote-unquote perfect a child would be if you could select blue eyes, blonde hair, brown eyes, or curly hair. Now, check this other thing out, too. If you think about it, according to the NIH, the National Institute of Health, about 1 in 5,000 people worldwide suffers from a genetic disorder caused by a defect in their mitochondria. Few, if any, of these disorders are being investigated for possible cures because developing a new drug is a very expensive process and there aren't enough people suffering from these conditions to justify the expense. So my question to you is, should government shoulder the cost of developing drugs that are designed to help only a very small fraction of the population? Particularly for women that are trying to conceive. It may or may not help families because the government may consider that this is an elective surgery. It's just so much to consider on this particular topic. I'll have the link for this story at the end of the show. In other news, a massive underground lake has been detected for the first time on Mars, raising hopes that more water and maybe even life exists there. Now, this discovery came about on Wednesday, that they discovered that this is a lake about 12 miles wide. It's basically 1 mile down into the soil of Mars, and it is the largest body of liquid water ever found on the red planet. Now, I posted this article on my Instagram page, and I said, why is this important that they have found water on planet Mars? And, there were quite a few people who actually agreed with my sentiment, and I'm going to tell you what I said. But before I do, let me read a little bit more from this article. It says, being able to access water sources could help humans survive on a future crewed mission to Earth's neighboring planet, with NASA aiming to send explorers in the 2030s. So here's my sentiment. As a chemist, I know the value of water within any environment because that would indicate life formation of some sort. However, I feel that our personal resources, such as the finances that we spend on those efforts, should be spent here on Earth. I know people want to leave planet Earth, but why go mess up another environment when you can't take care of your own? Think about it. We've got chemtrails flying in the air, GMOs on our crops. Should I go on? And so if we cannot take care of our water system here, why would we try to take care of another planet's water system? But I digress. So today we're going to tackle a topic of whether or not there is a scientific connection between the environment, water, and the youth's behaviors. So the reason why I'm bringing these topics up today is because we've kicked the summer off in a very negative tone. There are a lot of dots that we've got to connect on today's show. And I know that I won't have time to go through all the reasons or even I'm going to give you all some solutions, of course, because, I don't believe in just giving you all these depressing facts. I also do believe in giving you some solutions to these problems. So this is going to be a 2, possibly 3-part show. So don't touch that keyboard or that mouse. We'll be right back, and we're going to take a quick reset break. So hold on tight and grab your pens and notebooks to take some notes down. But you know what? You can even just press pause so you can absorb all this information. Also, don't forget to share this with your friends and family members because this is going to be a very great show today.
days when I was young, I'm not a kid anymore. But some days I sit and wish I was a kid again. Back in the days.
All right, guys. Well, we've been in the summer season for about 2 months now, and things have already popped off in the streets with our young people. Y'all know, if you've been following me long enough, you know that my passion and heart goes out to my young scholars. My scholars, anyone that knows me, know that I will go to bat for a kid in a heartbeat. I go into the concrete jungles from time to time, so I know the pain that many of these babies are facing. I also go on the other side of town where, they don't seem to have any worries per se financially, but they still have issues too. A lot of these kids you think that grow up in a rich home or two-parent home, they have issues also because their parents are making a lot of money, yes, but they're also dealing with trying to keep that job, so they have to fly out every week to the other coast, the West Coast. They may have to fly out down south to go to Florida or to New Orleans or wherever their jobs may take them. So they're not home either. And if you really want to get technical, kids who have two parents in their house but one of them is constantly gone is no different from a child who has a single parent and the father or the mother isn't there at all. It's kind of the same thing. You get to see your parent on the weekends when they come back. But anyway, as I go into the different areas, the different neighborhoods, I see so much happening with our kids. A few years ago in the neck of my woods, a group of teenagers were kicked out of Carowinds for disruptive behavior. And my daddy used to always say, if you follow a child home, you'll be greeted by the one who's promoting this type of behavior. You got to keep in mind that the apple don't fall too far from the tree. And if my children go out into the community and be disrespectful, that's a reflection on me and my husband. It is our job to keep our kids in check. And back in the day, if you got out of pocket, it was the community that took care of your behind before your parents got home from work. And then you got it again. We know that the African proverb says it takes a village to raise a child. But what happened to our village? It seems like it's disappearing. I mean, seriously. You have so much stuff happening with these kids all across the world. And it really bothers me because if we, decrease our youth, what generation are we going to have? A lot of stuff has happened to our young people over this summer, and it saddens me that it involves violence and death. A few weeks ago, an 18-year-old African-American young woman, Nia Wilson, was brutally stabbed and murdered by a savage in Oakland, California on BART. That's the transit system there. Her sister was also stabbed, but survived. And as I was doing research for today's show, it reminds me that all of this violence that our children have already had to endure over the summer can cause a lot of mental distress. And that hurt me because my son is 18. I have 3 children. And anytime I hear about the death of a child, it breaks my heart because it doesn't have to be, particularly in the savage ways that these people are doing it. I'm not going to give life to this savage who did that, but what I will say, we need to speak her name, Nia Wilson. We need to be reminded that this country promotes death in music, TV, the news, school. And if we think about all of these different areas, it seems like we're becoming desensitized to what we see. As soon as the class of 2018 walked across the stage, we were already shook with the numerous of deaths of our youth. 1 week after Freddie Richardson celebrated his son's high school graduation, he had to prepare for his son's unexpected death because he was shot and killed. Trayvon Richardson was an 18-year-old high school football standout. He was killed on Memorial Day, days after he walked across the stage on May 24th to receive his diploma from Cedar Grove High School in Ellenwood, Georgia. Richardson had plans to attend Valdosta State University in the fall, where he hoped to continue playing football. Right about now, this young man should be out having a good time with his friends. But no, he's 6 feet under. Joining him is Joshua Torrance, who also graduated from high school barely 5 days from the best academy in Atlanta. He was shot in the back and killed in an apartment complex where he lived. This teenager planned to go to Albany State University in the fall to study engineering or architecture. Many of our future scholars are being buried 6 feet under or residing in a 6x9 prison cell. These statistics are startling to me. But then we got to remember also a couple years ago there was a pool party in Texas where police officers were called out because they said that these kids, neighbors said that these kids were basically being a disturbance, and the police officers were showed running after these teens, aggressively handcuffing the black male teens while pinning one of the girls who was barely covered in her bathing suit on the ground by the head as she cried for her mother. This is ridiculous. I mean, all these stories that we're hearing. Then also, we got to remember, a few weeks ago, prior to my trip to New York, we had a 15-year-old Guzman Felix who was repeatedly attacked by a group of men wielding machetes across a bodega in the Bronx. Junior Guzman Felix. And it appeared to be a case of mistaken identity because they thought that he was the person filming a sex tape with one of their sisters. Mistaken identity. Crazy. All because of a lie. And as a sidebar, I remember Tupac said in I Get Around, a groupie bit the truth and told a lie. So you got guys in prison all because of a lie. And when we talk about the Me Too, hashtag Me Too movement, it's like, where is this coming from? So this young man had to basically get killed because of a lie. Imagine going back to school in a few weeks and your friends aren't going to be with you. Instead, you had to bury them over the summer and deal with the fact that they're not going to be returning to your school. So over the summertime, where you should be having cookouts, barbecues, whatever you call them in your area, going to the store, having a good time with your friends, going to the mall, eating cookout food, reading books, texting, playing video games, doing the stuff that average teens do. And instead, you've had to go to funerals all summer. I'm going to give you some facts about perhaps why this may be happening to our children. Like, why are our children off the chain? Why are the crime rates increasing? It could very well be, according to some of the research that I've come across, it could be because of H2O, dihydrogen monoxide, aka water. So I'm going to dig a little deep on this topic today, and you know what? I want you to share your thoughts. I want you to tell me if you believe in this. And see, here's what bothers me, is that when kids have a run-in with the law, You do realize that the moment you turn 16, your face can appear on the 6 o'clock news when you show out and commit crimes. You're no longer treated as a child. You're treated as an adult. School shootings, muggings, murder, road rage. I mean, all of these things are happening with our kids, and it seems like nothing is being done about it. New studies are basically helping scientists gain a deeper insight into the neurobiology of aggression and violence. So as I mentioned to you before, this is going to be a 2, possibly 3-part show as I dig deeper into why our environment and where we live has a direct impact on how well we are mentally, socially, and emotionally. I know many of you all will probably say that it shouldn't matter where you stay because a child should be able to succeed no matter what. Well, that's partially true, but when you think about children who are born into poverty, generation after generation, certain genes and traits are passed down. So think about it. If you're in a neighborhood, an environment where there's generational, where you have several generations living in that same neighborhood. Let's say the projects, the PJs, the hood, even trailer parks, because they're not excluded from this either. Okay? So if you have several generations living in that same neighborhood, that same environment, that means you've been drinking the water in that environment. I'm going to go a little deeper than that. All these children being born in these areas, in these environments. How many women do you know, African American, Hispanic, white, Asian, Indian, and so forth, that actually breastfeed their children? How many of y'all do y'all know? How many of them do you know? Stats show that more white women breastfeed their children more so than black women do. But keep in mind that as you're feeding your child Enfamil and all these other artificial milk formulas, you're more than likely using water straight from the faucet. So in recent years, breastfeeding rates have risen without question, with some of the greatest improvements being in the black community. Now, here's what the CDC has indicated in terms of black women who choose to breastfeed. They're saying that the number of black women has actually increased from 47.4% to 58.9% over an 8-year period. That's great. That means more than half of our women who are giving birth are actually breastfeeding. A more recent CDC study even shows that of infants born in 2012, 66% of black women chose to breastfeed. 75% of them are white women, and 80% are Hispanic women. So that means our brown sisters are actually breastfeeding more so than our white sisters are. Okay? So when a baby turns 6 months, only 27% of black mothers continue to breastfeed, as opposed to 44% of women overall. Now, here's what researchers are saying as to why there's a racial disparity. Perhaps there's a lack of breastfeeding education, in the hospital. So, for instance, when my daughter was born, who is 21 years old now, when she was born, I remember that the first thing I said was, I am going to breastfeed my baby. Do not give her formula. Do not give her anything other than putting her on my breast. So what happens? Well, they want to say, oh, your baby is jaundiced. No, she's not. I went off up in that hospital. When you're a mother for the first time, everything is very sensitive to you. But I knew what I needed to do to take care of my baby. So perhaps what is happening is when they have a lack of support, if you don't see women in your community breastfeeding on a regular basis, then why would you want to do it? So they need to have some better marketing campaigns to promote this. Now, again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because breast milk has more nutrients and minerals in it than this artificial milk. And if you think about it, giving your baby a whole dosage amount of your milk could keep away certain colds. It builds up their immunity system. And it could also lessen some of these stats that I'm getting ready to share with you right now. So, because again, think about it. If you're feeding your child Enfamil, you are basically giving them fluoride. Fluoride is found in the water. And you're mixing your baby's milk, that Enfamil, with this water. And I discovered, as I was doing research, that there were particularly six reasons why there could be potentially an environmentally racist perspective due to fluoridation. So let's go ahead and get into it. Reason number one, urban drinking water systems are more likely to be fluoridated than suburban and rural water systems, affecting blacks and Hispanics more than whites. Reason number two, commonly used fluoridation chemicals cause increased absorption of lead, and this lead absorbing effect is more pronounced in black and Hispanic populations, which are already overexposed to lead. This increased lead exposure is connected to increases in learning disorders, violent behavior, and affinity for cocaine addiction. Let me pause on that one. Let me go ahead and get straight into that particular thought. So, as I was going through this research, a certain doctor his name kept popping up because he did research on this. Dr. Roger Masters. He studied these stats. And of course, he put together a study that found high blood levels are associated with behavioral issues like violence and drug addiction. And he found that such behavior was more common in fluoridated communities. This could mean that the public policy of water fluoridation is increasing the levels of violence and drug use among blacks and Hispanics in the inner cities. Quote, for each race and each age, lead levels are significantly higher for children exposed to SIF treated water. That's silicofluoridated treated water. Silicofluoridated treated water. Okay, that's what SIF stands for. Those are the chemical symbols for it. With effects of exposure to SIF, there are significantly worse for minorities than for whites, and worse for blacks than for Hispanics. The results show that SIF treated water consistently increases the odds of high blood level, but that this effect is exacerbated where risk factors for high blood levels are above average. So think about it, guys. If you stay in a home or an apartment building or anywhere that has lead-based paint, this only exacerbates that issue or increases that issue. Okay? So many of these apartments have old paint in them. And it's not like you have a lead detector that you go around with every time you move somewhere and say, let me see if these walls have lead paint in them. Something else he stated in his article, although it has long been noted that blacks tend to be more vulnerable to lead uptake due to characteristics such as calcium in diet, low calcium in the diet, which is perhaps associated with lactose intolerance, SIF water treatment increases this risk substantially. And then he goes on to give more statistics about this. Now, how many of you all think that this is true? How many of y'all think this is true? Now, because if this is true, then why is this statistic a little on the other end of the spectrum? According to the scientific journal Pediatrics, in the study, there was a doctor who said that they followed 4,000 children in grades 5, 7, and 10. So 5th graders, 7th graders, and 10th graders. These students were from 10 public school districts in and around Birmingham, Alabama, 25 districts in Los Angeles County, and the largest public school district in Houston. During the study period, the rates of diagnosis for ADHD were consistently higher among white children, with 19% diagnosed by the 10th grade compared to 10% of blacks by 10th grade. Only 4% of Hispanic children were diagnosed by 10th grade. The racial disparities also persisted when it came to the use of ADHD stimulant medications such as Adderall and Ritalin, with the greatest differences seen in the children with the most severe symptoms of ADHD in 10th grade. 65% of white patients compared with 36% and 30% of black and Latino patients, respectively. Now, according to Coker, she said that there are still other factors that we did not measure that could account for these differences, such as difficulty accessing mental health care services despite insurance, parental perceived discrimination by the healthcare system, or parental distrust of mental health services care generally. Pediatricians may want to consider universal screening of children for school problems despite ADHD, even when parents do not recognize the problem. See, so on one hand, they're saying that the environment causes issues, but on the other hand, if some of these kids stay in, middle to upper class home, why is it that they're saying in this one article that white kids are having more issues with ADHD and ADD? Okay, it kind of baffles me. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on that because it really speaks volumes how you have scientists saying one thing on one hand and scientists on the other end of the spectrum are saying something completely different. And I think that as we look at these concepts, we have to really consider what's happening in our environment. For the past 25 years, tens of millions of Americans in hundreds of cities and towns have been drinking tap water that's contaminated with insecticides, weed killers, and artificial fertilizers. And of course, not only are you drinking it, but you're also bathing and taking showers in it. And you're also inhaling this when you're dealing with these chemicals. And of course, they're being absorbed through your skin. So as we think about all of these types of links, we got to come up with some solutions because next week I'm going to actually go a little bit deeper on some of these pesticides that are going in our systems and how they're endocrine disruptors and all of that. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on that, but I do want to kind of give you one thing that one of the teachers had indicated in one of these studies. A group of children who live near these pesticide intensive agricultural grounds had far less physical endurance in a test to see how long they could keep jumping up and down. They had inferior hand-eye coordination and could not draw a simple stick figure of a human being versus the kids who lived, in the upper footlands. So in other words, you have children who live in rural areas who are being sprayed with these pesticides and they can't do simple tasks like drawing stick figures, according to this particular article. And they also mentioned, too, that some of the teachers were very concerned about this because they noticed that a lot of these children had some behaviors associated with ADD and ADHD. But scientists have long known that when you have damage to certain regions of the brain, particularly your prefrontal cortex, it can result in violent behavior. So when you're talking about spraying your community with all of these different chemicals, this could also affect their behavior. Okay, so more recently, veteran teachers have complained that that children who are exposed are much more difficult to teach. They don't remember and they are more difficult to control. Because remember, when you're pregnant with these children, okay, you have issues where by the time the fetus is 20 weeks old, they've already been exposed to so many toxins in their neural tubes. And if you think about it, there isn't enough to basically prevent that barrier of the hormone that crosses the placenta into the developmental patterns of their brain. So think about it. The thyroid levels go up, and as a result, it could potentially have problems with your future offspring. So we got to consider all of these things, guys. I'm serious. We got to consider it all. And teachers are going back to school in a couple of weeks, and they're going to have to deal with this. They're going to have to deal with this, and it's a travesty because a lot of the teachers don't know what to do. You know, I feel bad for the first year teachers because they're going to be frustrated. They're not going to know how to handle some of these kids. So let me provide you guys with some quick solutions before we end the show today, because, you know, I'm trying to keep these podcasts very short so that you guys can digest it, okay? But I'm going to give you all some more tips on this next week, okay? But let me give you all some solutions today. We know that the water is bad, and I believe that there are things we can do to alleviate at least some of these issues with polluted water. We already know what's happening with Flint, okay? So for starters, we do need to talk about a detoxifying plan that will clear out your body of these chemicals. We know it's a lifestyle change. You can't detox for a day and say, oh, I'm straight. You can't detox for a week and say, I'm straight. You have to detox continuously by eating an abundance of fruits and veggies when they are in season, of course. I talked on my other page about drinking watermelon juice and eating those seeds. I'm adamant about seeded food, seeded fruits and veggies particularly. Right now, we are in the summer, and there are tons of things that you can eat. You want to buy organic to avoid some of these pesticides that are spread on our crops. You know, at least organic foods would ensure you that some form of assurance was feeding your body with good nutrition. I highly recommend parents that you guys give your children green smoothies every day for breakfast. Now, of course, you want to rotate your kale and your spinach. You don't want to eat that all the time totally, because there can be some other issues associated with that when you do those same veggies every day. Like if you're eating kale every day, or collard greens every day, you have to rotate your greens because they do have an absorbent amounts of calcium and alkalinity in them. Your kids don't always have to have a cooked meal for breakfast. And, you know, it could be as simple as just getting them a smoothie with some strawberries, mango puree, and a banana. And let me tell you, this will actually get them off to a kick, you know, with this full pack of nutrition along the way, at least until breakfast. So you don't need no Flintstone vitamins. They ain't real anyway. And when you pack your kids' lunch, make sure that you don't pack your child's lunch with all these colorful items like these Takis, these hot orange Cheetos, this red punch, and other artificial flavorings. There was a young lady who had to have her gallbladder removed because she was eating like 4 or 5 bags of hot Cheetos every day. Every day. And you could also, number 3, use essential oils for your child. Last semester, I had a student who told me she was going to a therapist, and she said that while she was going to the therapist, she did not want to be put on medication, and the type of therapist that she went to was a holistic one. So he recommended that she have lavender in a necklace that she wears around her neck, so throughout the day, the smell of this essential oil would actually help to relax her. My daughters also gave me an essential oil necklace, and I use that from time to time when I know that the day is going to be kind of a stressful one because it's going to be a long day. I use that to kind of calm me. But I also have a bottle that I've concocted some essential oils like Lang Lang and frankincense and myrrh. That I rub on my wrist, and it gives me a boost of positivity. It really does. It lessens my anxiety and stress, and I'm good. Parents, you can place a diffuser in your child's room while it's producing a calming fragrance in the air to allow them to feel good while sleeping. Studies show that certain scents can produce a peaceful sleep at night. So, you know, you may want to invest in a diffuser that certain scents can come out at night to allow your child to relax. And then they can go into a deep sleep of peaceful, positive thoughts. And teachers, you can do the same thing. You may want to get a diffuser in your classroom rather than those name brand wall plugins to help circulate positive energy in your room. Now, of course, you have to be sure that your scholars aren't allergic to certain fragrances and smells, but I don't see teachers checking for that. You know, when I've gone into some of the classrooms, they have those plugins in the wall. So I'm sure a little bit of lavender oil isn't going to hurt you. Okay. In today's time, kids are allergic to way more stuff than we were back in the day. So I just want to leave you guys with some positivity. So before we close out and we meet back up for next week, I want you guys to drop me some emails and DMs and some messages on my platform to let me know what you think about this very topic. Mental health is vital to the heartbeat of the African American community. However, it is a issue that the community as a whole, all of the communities need to talk about, because we have black kids that are losing their mind. We have white kids that are losing their mind. Hispanic kids, Asian kids. There are a lot of children losing their minds. Even the so-called good kids, the goody two-shoe kids, are getting caught up. So we have to be mindful of what they're doing throughout their summer. So before you guys go back to school, make sure you take into consideration some of these things that I've mentioned within this podcast today. Remember, their frontal lobe isn't fully developed, so, until age 25. So sometimes the decisions that they make aren't always the best. So let me know your thoughts. Is there a connection between the food, the environment, and the water? Should we hold the alphabet boys accountable? The FDA, EPA, NIH. Join us next week as we tackle part 2 of the part 3 of this segment. Until next time, guys, thank you for tuning in to the More Than Just Science Show. Continue to tune in every Saturday at 1 p.m. I am your host, Professor TK the Chemist, and you've been listening to the More Than Just Science Show on Spreaker.com or YouTube. Have a great Saturday, everyone, and most of all, educate your mind, body, and soul with words and thoughts that will empower you. The library is free. You don't have to have money to go to the library. Malcolm X once said, education is your passport to your future. Young people, elders, get up, get out, and get some knowledge. Just because the summer is here doesn't mean that your mind should be on vacation either. You need to learn something new every single day. Be allergic to negativity. Be allergic to being average. Let me give you some positive vibrations. I want y'all to go and listen to Strength, Courage, and Wisdom by India Ari. Use that song to motivate your mind. I love positive songs. Music is good for the soul. And when you're going through something hard, something difficult, play positive songs. Certain songs that I listen to can get me riled up. But I also have to balance that with some positivity, some positive vibrations. So go look up, go Google, go YouTube, India Ari's Strength, Courage, and Wisdom. Until next time, peace.